Welcome to the Chopin channel. I'm Roberto Poli. In the first half of the 19th century, musical notation was still limited in how precisely it could describe certain rhythmic figures. Composers did not have a standardized way of showing how certain rhythmic values should align when different divisions of the beat were used at the same time. For example, when an accompaniment in a regular meter such as 2/4, 3/4, or 4/4 was written in triplets, and a melody note was meant to coincide with the third note of that triplet, there wasn't really a clear notation for it. The rhythm we would write today to show that relationship, a quarter note followed by an eighth note topped by a 3, simply did not exist, or at least it wasn't common practice. Chopin, like most composers of his time, had to work within these limitations. So instead of using the notation we'd now consider correct, he wrote the figure as a dotted eighth and 16th. To us, 21st century musicians with 2 centuries of music history that Chopin didn't experience, and what 2 centuries they were, that looks as if the last note should come after the triplet. But that's not how Chopin or anybody else in his time understood this rhythm. This was just how composers notated that kind of rhythmic relationship in the early 19th century. You can see this all over Chopin's music, most famously in the Polonaise Fantasy, especially on the last page, where the melody and accompaniment seem slightly out of sync if you take the notation literally. Now, when we listen to Arthur Rubinstein's recording of the Polonaise Fantasy, we can tell that he used the Breitkopf und Härtel edition, which was the standard Chopin edition in Europe at that time. And if you follow along in that score, you see the problem. The notation looks as if the 16th notes and the melody should come a little late. So it explains why Rubinstein would interpret and play the rhythm that way. It's completely understandable because he was responding to what he saw on the page. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because Rubinstein, who was born in 1887, would surely have been exposed to that notion that different rhythmic values can align in this way. Yet the edition he used effectively trained generations of pianists to misalign these rhythms. And because Rubinstein's interpretations became the gold standard for Chopin performance in the mid-20th century, this kind of misalignment, and I'm not exclusively referring to the Polonaise Fantasy, became part of tradition. Pianists began to believe that this slight rhythmic offset was actually Chopin's intention, when, in fact, it was just a notational convention that had been misunderstood. We see the same issue 6 years before the Polonaise Fantasy was composed in Chopin's Prelude in E major, opus 28, number 9. The same dotted figuration appears, and for many decades it was misinterpreted for that very reason, a printing error. The Breitkopf and Härtel edition, first published in 1840, printed the 16th notes after the third note of the triplet instead of aligning them. This small engraving decision caused enormous confusion. The manuscript Chopin prepared to serve as the basis for that edition for the Breitkopf und Härtel has survived. When we compare the two, it's clear that Chopin indicated an alignment. So why did the engraver shift it? We can only guess. Probably he was assigning a mathematical distribution of values. If a 16th note equals a quarter of a beat, it can't possibly line up with the third note of the triplet. That single decision shaped the way pianists played this piece for nearly 2 centuries. Only much later, once the manuscripts were carefully studied, did modern editions such as the Écrire National edition correct the alignment. Yet, even today, we still hear pianists misalign the 16th notes in this prelude. Incredibly, some competitors in the 2025 Chopin competition, who were required to use the Écrire edition, still played them incorrectly. Old habits, it seems, die hard. A handful of pianists, though, have studied the score carefully and played it as Chopin intended. One example is Vincent Ong, who performed the E major prelude with the correct rhythmic alignment, a rare and refreshing detail. Now, there's another layer to this. Once you realign the 16th with the third note of the triplet, the 32nd notes that follow suddenly make a little more sense. They're not just quick values at the end of beats, they are the second half of those 16th notes, and in turn, they become the second half of the third note of the triplet. When you play it this way, the line breathes naturally and the rhythmic tension resolves exactly where it should. Of course, In this illustration, I gave a boxy feel to the rhythm to make the point clear. But this is the principle behind these alignments in Chopin and in any music of the late 18th and early 19th century, and well into the second half of the 19th century. And so this invites a bigger question. How many rhythmic traditions, and I put that in quotations, that we've inherited from 19th century editions might actually be based on engraving conventions rather than on the composer's intentions? It reminds us that interpretation isn't just about taste, it's also about reading history critically, understanding how notation evolved, and constantly reevaluating what we think we know.